My story. Remember that your personal story is always the best way to express the hope and opportunity that A.L. Williams offers. Always have a personal story. Tell events of your life that have a moral or a point to them, and always make it easy for someone to identify with your feelings. Always remember what it was like for you. A lot of people don't believe me, but I started working the year I was born. I paid for the whole first year of my life. My mother and father didn't have a lot of money by any means. In fact, they fell immediately into debt the night of their honeymoon. My dad had borrowed my uncle's car, and they were driving along the road on the way to Florida, and the car swerved off the road and into a pasture where it hit and killed a cow. Not only was my uncle's car all banged up, but the cow happened to be the prize-winning animal of the farm. Between trying to pay for this mess and the hospital bills, my parents needed all the extra money they could get. So when I was born, my mother put me to work right away. She entered me in a carnation baby contest in Macon, Georgia. They were giving away some savings bonds and a year's worth of diapers and carnation milk. I ended up winning. I didn't cost my parents hardly anything for about a year. I can't say for sure, but this turn of events must have had something to do with an early premonition or predetermination. I had to be an entrepreneur. I had my first paying job at age 12 as a stock boy in a grocery store. When the older and regular delivery boy quit, I quickly grabbed the chance to become the local delivery boy using a bicycle. My short legs could hardly touch the pedals. From the time that I was a small boy until after I started college, I had many jobs. I was a soda jerk. I worked at the bakery. I did construction work. I was a plumber's assistant. I worked at the heating and air company, two service stations, and managed a shoe store and a vending company. I attended Georgia Tech for 2 years before realizing that I didn't want to be an engineer for some big corporation. I may be one of the few people to make the dean's list at Georgia Tech for every quarter I was there, and then drop out in 2 years. During this time, I married Norma, the perfect wife and partner for a dreamer like me. Just by chance, during the summer of 1962, while home from college, I took what I thought was a part-time summer job with the railroad. It turned into a 17-year job, just over broke job. For the first 4 or 5 years, the idea of working on the railroad seemed intriguing to me. Gradually, the romantic idea of being a railroad man wore off. I hated being away for days at a time and working all night or getting up at 5 o'clock in the morning to go to work. Sometimes I felt like an indentured servant. I was just a number. In fact, I still remember my number. I was 42818. That was me. Today, people ask me, Herbert, do you ever dream of working on the railroad? And I say yes. When I have nightmares, I do. During that time, I learned a lot about myself. I learned what it was like to want to be somebody, but to be trapped in a job working for someone else. As each year wore on, I became more and more frustrated. I didn't want to work for a company that paid jobs. I wanted to work for a company that paid people. But I couldn't just walk away. My family was growing and I had heavy responsibilities. When was What was even worse, as I looked around, it seemed that things had changed for me. Life didn't look so full of potential anymore. It seemed that the business avenue that had been open to me after high school were all closed now. Everything I thought about doing either required a lot of money or a lot of experience, or it required quitting my secure job. It was a little scary to see no way out. At first, I was discouraged, then determination set in. I began reading motivational and self-help books. I committed myself to growing, and eventually I came to a fantastic realization. I came to the realization that I didn't have to be a railroad man. When I was born and that doctor held me up by my feet and spanked my rear end, he didn't stamp railroad man on my behind. I could be anything I wanted to be. From the time that I woke up, I spent the next 12 years trying to get out of my rut. I wanted freedom more than anything else. I really wasn't motivated by dreams of becoming wealthy or making a tremendous amount of money. I couldn't comprehend that sort of thing. Norma and I had 3 children and one on the way. All I asked was an opportunity to keep my same standard of living, yet be my own boss. My peers just laughed when I told them about dreams of being able to go into business for myself. But I did one smart thing. I kept an open mind. I was always looking and searching. In the late 60s, many different so-called opportunities came our way. They were ventures with different marketing companies. I won't go into great detail except to say I stuck it out with one of the ventures for 7 years, thinking this would be my great escape from the railroad. Even Norma believed, just like I did, that this time it would work for us. I sacrificed more than half of my railroad working time only to find myself under tremendous financial pressure. But for 7 years I hung on, and every time I would get up out of the ditch and put my fingers right over the edge, somebody would step on them and I would fall back down. I was becoming more and more frustrated. I wasn't a quitter, but I was considering it. I had my hands half raised in surrender. About that time, along came a part-time AL rep who had only just started. I remember exactly the way he recruited me. He had sold me $200,000 of coverage for less money than I was paying for $62,000. I was a satisfied client. Not more than a month later, he brought me my policy right back to me, and I could tell he was excited about something. I said, "What are you so excited about?" And he said, "I just quit my job." He sold pianos and organs in Macon. Then he told me that the week he had come to see me, he had made 3,000. I said, "What? 3,000?" He said, since that time, I've made 2,000. So in a month and a half, I've made 5,000 bucks. Envy started to set in. I had spent 12 years trying to get away from that prison in the railroad, and here was a guy selling pianos at the mall telling me he just made 5,000. He tried to explain his override system, and I could tell that he barely knew beans about the marketing potential of his new job. But I knew I could see right away that this sounded pretty better than any venture I had seen while working on the railroad. It hit me like a ton of bricks. All those years of trying this and trying that and keeping an open mind paid off. I knew then and there this was it for me. This was my chance for freedom. The first thing I wanted to do was to go tell other people about it. I wanted to start right away. I came on board, and my first goal was to beat that piano salesman. He made $5,000 in a month and a half, so I made $6,000 the first 30 days after getting licensed. I made over $70,000 my first 7 months, and over $100,000 my first full 12 months with A.L. Williams. In late July of 1979, 18 months after starting, I moved my family to Denver, Colorado to build my company within a company. Now the magic of compound dreaming could really take off. I couldn't believe that this was really happening for me. I was both excited and scared. I remember when I first joined the railroad, they promised me I was really going places. I did. Alabama, Atlanta, Columbus, places I didn't really want to go. Also, I remember when I left the railroad, I had mixed emotions, joy and happiness. Now here I was in Denver with the freedom and responsibility to make my own future. I was in business for myself, but not by myself. I had learned a lot about the fundamentals of the ALW crusade and the ALW way of doing business. But the real key to my success was that I had learned how to have a builder's mindset. I practiced this philosophy. Knowledge doesn't produce activity, but activity does produce knowledge. I went to Denver with one mission: to build a network of outlets. In my first month in Denver, I had 12 personal recruits. Many of our original RVPs came from this group. After 2 months in Denver, Norma and I were promoted to RVP October 1979. We had the greatest business opportunity in the world. After 90 days, we had 350 people recruited. At the end of 6 months, we had over 1,125 people, and I had produced our first RVP. It was during this time that the Humphrey Management Factory concept was born. We set up a system whereby building would never stop. We learned the power of the words hold a meeting. We introduced opportunity meetings to ALW, and through our hard work and the tremendous effort of many wonderful people who came our way, the Humphrey Worldwide Network was born, and I was destined to become ALW's team of the first decade, 1977 to 1987. Today, Norma and I have built one of the largest hierarchies in A.L. Williams. In doing so, we have built an estate that will provide financial security for our children and our children's children, and perhaps beyond. We have been able to help our parents and family members when they needed financial support. We have been able to travel and provide the best for our family. But you know, when I leave this earth, and if I've made millions of dollars and own anything I want, it will all be minor compared to one thing: the fact that at age 36, I escaped from the railroad, and I don't have to go to work for someone else ever again. The funny thing is, I wouldn't take anything for those years I worked on the railroad. Do you know why? Because they made me appreciate the freedom that I know I have now. One of the first steps to greatness requires a lot of courage. You must first see yourself achieving the dreams you once had. The next step is to try. Try to make your dreams come true. Never give up. Keep an open mind. Always be searching for your personal opportunity, whatever it is. And remember one thing: it can be done. I know, because it happened to me.